she stopped me and she asked me a question which in the end changed my life, because she said, Mimi, is it intuition or is it empathy? And I remember thinking, absolutely not. Like, what even is empathy? What has it got to do with anything? So when you ask me, has this always been part of you? I think yes. I just didn't have the word for it, the name for it. And it wasn't until that point in my life that I began to recognize it. And the rest is history, but it certainly changed my life.
Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I am joined by the absolutely amazing personality, beautiful heart, Mimi Nicklin. Mimi is an internationally recognized best-selling author, multi-award-winning founder of the world's widest-reaching organizational empathy training and engagement platform, Empathy Everywhere. But I can tell already through our interaction, she is a person of heart and gratitude. And Mimi, I am just so excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh, me too. I can't think of a better way to start my day.
So we talked a lot about our kids and getting to know this or that. But one thing that you shared is you're a person that expresses, understands, and you feel very empathetic. You mentioned that your daughter is that. Has it always been that way for you?
It's a really interesting question, Tyler. I think yes.
That's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm here to bring the interesting questions, not just like boilerplate, whatever's on your website. No. We're going to ask some
5-star host tick done. Okay. I think it was always part of me, but I never knew. So I'll tell you a tiny bit of a story to answer the question. But in 2018, I moved to Dubai in the Middle East for a CEO role. And I had been in corporate advertising, actually. So advertising and marketing for my whole career. And I moved there to take over a business, an American business, actually, but in the Middle East. And it was my first kind of step outside of very structured corporate world into kind of an SME business. But when I got there, Tyler, that business was pretty much bankrupt, but they hadn't
broken,
very broken, right?
Okay, broken.
And they had no clients left. We had no revenue. We had a very sad team. And the honest truth is I was entirely overwhelmed. I had no idea how to be a business
owner, the job?
Basically. Well, because they didn't tell me. Right? They never told me that. I moved across the whole world without any context of what I was walking into. But the reason I give you that kind of little story up front is that in that process, I was so lost. I was like, I have no idea how to turn around a small business. I've come from corporate where there's, 19 people in finance. So I went to see a business coach, my first and only. And in that lunch, when I went to meet her, she was asking me about my leadership style. And I was talking at the time, I remember so well, about intuition, being an intuitive leader. And she stopped me and she asked me a question, which in the end changed my life, because she said, Mimi, is it intuition or is it empathy? And I remember thinking, absolutely not. Like, what even is empathy? What has it got to do with anything? So when you ask me, has this always been part of you? I think yes. I just didn't have the word for it, the name for it. And it wasn't until that point in my life that I began to recognize it. And the rest is history, but it certainly changed my life.
In regards to that business, at that inflection point, did it change because you realized this is the secret and you finally had a word to put to it, or that you understood, this is what I need to bring to the organization to fix it?
I think it was a little bit of both. It was more about a conceptual kind of understanding that just made sense to everything I already knew. I had a I had a good career in the corporate world. I had risen very high in my roles very fast. I always remember people saying, "You can't do this by then," and I always
Mm.
did, you know. And I think
Don't
I always
challenge me because then I'm going to go do it.
exactly
Uh-huh.
right.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think I always had these skills, these kind of, I guess, people skills, human skills. I was using them. Um, but once I kind of went through this process or this, I don't know, this revelation really, it was that I was able to structure them. So I never, ever thought I would write a book. I never planned to be an author. That was not one of my life goals. But upon discovering this, I started to write, but not for a book, for myself. I
Okay.
was writing to make sense of this and what this might mean in my work, in this organization. Fundamentally, that ended up being a book. But yes, I think it was just part of becoming more deeply engaged in this content that it made sense of everything I always felt but
Mm-hmm.
never knew. So
Mm.
yeah, that's
I,
I
I,
think
I,
it's important.
I love it because it is one, I think it gives agency to people that are like, I know there's a better way to lead and do this. I just need to be able to do it. But then there's also the other side of it is that was not the way for me.
Mm,
I had to learn it. I had
mm,
to learn empathy. I had to understand that it was the solution to all of the challenges and problems and difficulties and expressions of insecurity that kept me from being authentically who I was. And so
mm,
that juxtaposition for me, it's interesting because you come into a business that's broken, you understand empathy as a solution. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say the reason probably that organization might have been broken is there was probably a complete lack of authentic vulnerability and displayed through empathy. That's just my guess.
mhm,
Because
mhm.
if
Yeah.
not, I wonder if you employed that, that's why you such good turnaround results. It's just my
Mm. Yeah,
speculation. Is that?
it's a very accurate speculation. I think, particularly when it came to obviously the people, the
Mhm.
workforce. Um, I never talk too publicly about the reality because there's real people involved in the
Yeah.
story, right? But the truth of the matter is, yes, there was a real lack of empathy or of
Yeah.
sense of self. I think people were walking around that business with a very strong guard around themselves. They weren't wearing the clothes they wanted to wear. They had been told not to have their hair in certain ways. There was all kinds of barriers put in place for people to be able to just show up as themselves.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think it's very accurate. I also think that empathy is a hard skill, right? So it's something that for so long we just haven't considered in the working world. But when you put that understanding, which is fundamentally what we're talking about, right? Perspective taking. That's what empathy is. It's the
Hmm.
ability to take the perspective of another. When you put that at the beginning of everything you do, whether it's internally or with clients or winning new business or whatever it is, you win, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all running businesses full of people. So the better you understand those people, the better you can do everything. So yes, there's a role in things like vulnerability and self censorship and confidence, psychological safety in the workplace. 100% we're talking about those skills, but we're also just talking about how to negotiate better, right?
Hmm.
How to
Yeah.
manage clients
Yeah.
better,
Yeah.
how to ensure that you win pitches when you're in the room because you're able to listen to those clients better than anybody else did, right? So there is a spectrum of where that comes to life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where I want to, and I'm, just again, continuing this conversation, it's the asking of, for me, why I wasn't empathetic in displaying it is because there was so much self-preservation because my insecurities overruled me. And so my main action, I was just super intense. Super intense. That's how I, survived life. That's how I got through life. And, that's how I dealt with, trauma in my life. I just put my head down and push. And that was a bulldozer. And what
Mm,
I found out from people is like, it's all about you. And it's like, that's not me. That's not what I want to be.
yeah.
And yet I see that in organizations. I see so many leaders, that fall into those, the guard, like you were talking about, of their insecurities. And so there is not a display of empathy. And so when you try to explain to them, it's like, hey, be more empathetic. And they look at you like, I think you're saying a word, but I have no idea what it is. It's kind of like, and I know you spent time in South Africa. You've been all over the world. It's like somebody is speaking to you in Zulu and you've never heard it. And you're like,
And
what?
Tyler, some people never have heard it. So a
or
few
experienced
months,
it.
yeah, experienced it or not. So everything you say is so true. First of all, most people don't know what it is, right? They think it's a soft skill. They think it will make them soft. They think it's like kindness or sympathy, or compassion, which it isn't, right? But secondarily, it amazes me how many people literally haven't heard of it. So a couple of months ago, I did some work in California, online, but in California with previously incarcerated people. And this was a course about empathy in life, right? And most of these previously incarcerated people had been in jail for more than 20 years. So a really big part of their life. And now they were back in the world, rebuilding, reskilling, doing amazing things to have a new chapter of their lives. And we were talking about empathy and the role of empathy. And about an hour into this webinar, there was one lady who hadn't said much. So I asked her, would you like to add something? And she said, well, Mimi, what I'm thinking is that if someone had taught us this when we were small, we wouldn't have hurt the people we hurt. Right? I nearly fell off my chair, right? Because and this was recent, Tyler, like just 3 months ago, maybe. I felt like that statement will never leave me because it talks to exactly what you were just saying, but on a bigger scale. If we don't know what this is, how can we heal the world? Right? So that is why my first objective, and thank you for having me today, is to drive awareness. Because some people get it wrong what it is, but there are many millions who don't know what it is.
Do you think that the big challenge there, and as I was going down this pathway of learning more about, empathy as a solution to my insecurity, right? And I looked at that and it's like, trying to find definitions, and Brene Brown's like, put yourself in someone's shoes. And I'm like, that just doesn't sit with me. I can't, like, that's going to hurt one of us. Meaning, if I put myself in your shoes, my feet are not going to fit in your shoes. Or if I put myself in your shoes and both of us in it, it's not going to feel good, right? It's not going to work. And I can't see what you see because I can't possibly do that because my eyes, it's just a totally different perspective. And so when I read that and when I hear it, I'm like, but it's hard to comprehend. And so I kind of came up with this definition my own, and it's evolved, but coming to that point of what you just said is, if I would have known this, I wouldn't have hurt the people I hurt. And for me, I define empathy as putting your arms around someone and walking with them. And where I find that, and kind of that, and I want you to take that as you've seen it, and it doesn't have to be a destination you work with, but that's what I try to express because it takes vulnerability. I have to expose myself. We're connected. We have to go at the same pace. For me, being intense, I had to slow down. Yeah. I tell people, super intense people, and they get it. It's like, I had to learn to be lazy because I had to slow down to be with people and say, I will go at your pace. I can't drag you. And I think that was also mean, like, I had to recognize I had to change to be willing to be with people. So as I share all of that, like, give me, like, as you've worked through it with others, like, your take on it, but, again, continuing this conversation.
Look, I think I love your arms around people definition. I love the visualization of that, right? Like just the feel of that.
Yeah.
I think where the challenge is, Tyler, for many people listening, especially if they're in leadership positions, they don't want to do that, right? They don't want to fundamentally.
Or they're told they can't.
Or they're told they can't. But I think one of the big challenges is that, and there is a lot, particularly in America, there is a lot of content today that is very emotional in the workplace. Now, this is a good thing. As I said, awareness is good, right? But you're laughing, right? But the reality is, for like 80% of our business leaders in the world, and I live in Asia,
Yep.
right? So my few billion people in the world are in very different cultures from the
Yes.
Americans. And I would say 80% of them are men, right? Still, right? I'm guessing. I don't have that data, but 70, 80% of the leaders are men. In some
Yeah.
countries, it's far higher on this side
Yeah.
of the world.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm going to drive them to consider empathetically understanding people in their organizations, there is no way I could give them your definition, however brilliant it
Okay.
is,
Okay.
because they can't understand that. I mean, culturally, there's no way. In some cultures, it's impossible because you can't touch each other, right? But
Yeah.
even just as a metaphor, they see themselves slightly more traditionally, I'd say, than some of
Sure.
the businesses in the US. And that concept of sort of stepping into someone's world, hugging them fundamentally,
Yeah. Yeah.
being with them, it's too, let's say, soft for them. So, what I spend a lot of my time doing actually is understanding and helping them understand that this is a cognitive skill set. And actually, it is, right? Empathy is
Yeah.
built into the prefrontal cortex of your brain. You were born with this. So even if one of your listeners is listening and they
Yeah.
think, I just can't be like Tyler, right? I
Great.
can't step into that person's world. I don't want to wrap my arms around someone. I don't want to care. That's just not who I am. That doesn't mean that you can't use empathy, because this is a cognitive skill set. So, can you still take the perspective of another without doing that? Yes. So, one of the organizations that uses empathy to the most kind of, I don't know, effectiveness, right? And I know there's a lot of contention around US government organizations, but without all of that contention is the FBI, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the FBI teach empathy as part of hostage negotiations, for example. So they have a model called the Behavioral Change Stairway. It's a 5-step model. And fundamentally, they use it for really hard, complex, often violent situations. And what that stairway tells us is that to get to behavioral change, so to get somebody out of a bank who is holding hostages, the first 2 steps are listening and empathy. Now, nobody in the FBI is wearing anyone's shoes or putting their arms around anyone. So those definitions are not wrong, Tyler.
Yeah. No, it's
But for me,
great.
it's very important that in empathy for my audiences,
Yeah.
I give them definitions and ways to understand this that meet them where they
It's
are.
great.
Because my vision is to create more empathy in the world, and therefore we need slightly different ways in
Yeah.
to slightly different people. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's awesome, and I love it in the context, in the foundation, the development of, and I think that's where, it's what I use, because it's how I try to interact with people. Right?
Yeah.
Does it mean I'm always going to come put my arm around you? No, it's the appropriate, but it's the mental picture of, oh, that is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do. But I think for
Exactly.
you coming, it's like, all right, how do we, for someone that can digest it and appreciate it in a different context, because not everyone understands putting your feet in their shoes, or what it really means. Is like, we have to continue to define it, so that way the language that people are used to interacting in, it has a definition. It's no different if we're communicating, and again, I'm communicating in Spanish and you're communicating in French, and it's like, I don't get what you're saying. Then we have to find a common. If our common language is English, then great, I'm going to speak in that so we can communicate. I think with empathy, it very much is the same. It's what I took from.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons, so I termed this work listening-led leadership. And the reason I did that was because about 2 years ago, maybe 3, and this has been quite a short journey, it's been under 5 years, I realized, I can't just go out and talk about empathy, because at that time particularly, no one's going to listen. I can do that on my channels, right? If you're on my
Mhm.
LinkedIn or my Insta or my YouTube, then that's what I talk about. But if
Yeah.
I'm going out into their spaces, their conferences, their events, their businesses, I need, as I said earlier, in empathy for them, to find a way to frame this that they can accept, right? That
Yep.
that makes them feel the most comfortable, and also just makes them open to listening. So the core of all empathy, whether you are, like you said, visualizing to step into their world, step into their shoes, be with them, the only way to understand another is to listen. There is no other way, right? Because as you said earlier, there's a barrier there. How can I possibly understand you? Let's talk about, so I live in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We have quite a large refugee population here from across Asia. And I often do some work with those young women predominantly as they're looking for rebuilding their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ever really imagine what it was like for them to be pushed out of their countries or the things that they saw? No, but that doesn't mean I can't empathize. That doesn't mean that I can't listen, right? And through that listening, I will come far closer to being able to understand that person and their world. So listening led leadership fundamentally says that there are many definitions of leadership, right? Probably a few million on Google. But for me, Tyler, it's really simple. If you lead, someone has to be following you.
Yeah.
Because if no one is following, you are
You're
just
not
walking,
leading.
right? So people follow those who listen to them. And maybe for your audience, anyone listening
That's great.
to us, think
Yeah.
about that. Think about the leaders, whether it's in community, in school, in college, in work, that you follow, you want to be with, you want to work hard for, you want to show up for. I'm 100% sure that those were leaders that you felt valued and listened to you. So listening led leadership helps break down some of those definitions and just says, are you listening?
Yeah.
And most people, Tyler, say, not really.
Well, what's interesting, kind of interjection with that. I had a friend shared, he was in a seminar and a gentleman was talking about listening, right? And he said, you can do 3 things when you listen. You can agree with, okay, you're just shaking, okay. You can disagree with. Either one of those, you've already made a decision. You're making a decision. Okay, it's 2 ends of the extreme. Or you can be with. And it really struck me, and it was like, okay, you have the agree with, I'm just listening for everything to justify. Yes, everything you're saying, I agree with.
Yeah.
And then if you're saying something like, I don't think so. No, I disagree. I've already made a decision.
Yeah.
But if I just sit here and be with, and I'm just learning and digesting this, and it's like, how can I do more of that? Right? To be with. But what I hear from you is you've described in that listen-led leadership, it is very much as a follower, I'm going to be with.
Yeah.
Now, a part of, go ahead. Yeah.
To do that. Sorry, Tyler. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Keep going. No, you're good.
I just wanted to say that earlier you had said, you had spoken about slowing down and teaching us to slow down, right?
Yeah.
The only way you can do that be with, which I just love, is to slow down.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a huge amount of time, right? Because often leaders say to me, Mimi, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And so I ran a short exercise in some of my masterclasses, which is 90 seconds, right? And I get them to do it. And then afterwards, when they've sort of felt its power, I say to them, so do you feel now that you know something new about that person? There's a new connection, often with a stranger sitting next to you. Yes. Do you know that took 90 seconds? So you can no longer tell me, Mr. Leader or Mrs. Leader, that you don't have time, because we all have 90 seconds, right? But
I think it's reframing. It's we all have time for things that we think are valuable.
That's true.
Right? In making a connection, in developing, expressing empathy. And I think that's where the listen-led leadership is like, it's valuable. It's extremely valuable, especially in our world where people don't seem, aren't connected. And there's such this, disconnection globally, right? You're in Malaysia, I'm in the US, and we're disconnected, but how do we connect? It's what we started doing. I learned about your daughter. We talk about the different things. I know what I went and searched. I knew what time it was there for you, because it's just, that's a connection, right? And it doesn't take much time to express value. But I think that's where, whether you talk about the empathy deficit in work, are we so busy that we don't feel we have time for that?
It's a big question. I think the short answer is yes, but I think the deeper answer is deep, in that I think we lost ownership of our time. So when you speak, so every week I get to work with all kinds of different people. Yesterday I was in a school, often it's corporate. when you speak to middle management, which is, 80% of the workforce or any workforce,
Yeah.
they don't feel that they have control of that time. And that impacts all kinds of things around mental health, around burnout, around well-being, and yes, around performance. So I think the first part is the ownership of our time. And then I think the second thing is, in the last 20, 30 years, since the self-help industry, maybe it's been around for longer than that, but since it's really kind of taken hold of our lives, right? What it has been doing, Tyler, for like 20 years at least, is tell us all en masse that it's all about you. And in very good ways, you are important. You are of value, and we should know that. And that is very important messaging. However, when you at scale tell the entire population of the world all the time, it's all about you. You need to look after you first. Fill your cup first. Put your seatbelt on first. All of those things, right? What happens is the world becomes all about me. And I think that is part of the reason we're now living in a deficit of the we, right? Because I don't think it matters, because I think the most important thing is me. But the reality is it isn't. Because when you look at evolution, we are a pro-social species. We don't do well alone, and yet we have an entire industry pretty much normalizing just being alone. And then we wonder why 52% of the world today is lonely, why 900,000 people a year are dying of loneliness, nearly 1 million people. Right? We wonder how we got there. Well, we got there because we created it ourselves, right? We created workplaces and a world that was all about me. And I think, whilst, as I said, it is very important that our children grow up knowing the value of themselves. And you spoke earlier about kind of confidence and insecurity. This work is important, but it should not have been done, in my opinion, in a void of community. Because community is part of who we have always been. When you look at us as tribal people, many hundreds of thousands of years ago, we knew, Tyler, if somebody left the tribe, either they died or we did. We knew, we forgot. So lots of my work today, when I speak to audiences, my favorite slide is one that says, this is not a concept, it's a memory. We just have to help people find it. You know how to do this. You know how to listen with, to be with people, but you have to take back that autonomy of your time, of what you value. And that's why the first step of all my work is awareness, because we have to help your listeners and everybody else's listeners to understand the value of this.
I love what you're saying, this idea of we've fixated so much on the individualistic side of it that we forgot about the community side of it. And I think that those have been disconnected when they need to be connected. You can best serve the community when you're understanding and you're working through the process. You're remembering what it means. Just because I put on my, oxygen mask first doesn't mean I'm done. No, I need to look to the person beside me. Do you need help with yours? That may be my child. That could be a young individual. That could be somebody who's just having a difficult time and thinking, yes, I have to put my oxygen mask first on, then I have to serve and help. That's what we're here for. And I think what I gathered is so much of our society is me, and not me, then we. It's right.
Yeah.
That then has to be connected. The other piece of that, which I wonder, because you said we need to remember. Maybe instinctually, subconsciously, it's built into our DNA. But I wonder if we've gotten to a point in place because of the disconnection of communities and so many children that they don't know what it means to be connected and in community.
For sure.
And so I think that's where it's, how do we go back there? And instead of so much, and I appreciate what you're saying, it's remember, but it's like, oh no, we need to teach because they don't necessarily know.
cognitively, like from a tactical point of
Yeah.
view, when I
Yeah.
talk about it's a memory, I mean instinctively, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a video that I use in my keynotes and stuff, of my little girl. As I mentioned earlier, she's 7, and she came onto the set, the film set one day, which is in my home. So she came home, and like any confident 7-year-old girl, she was like, "Why do you get to be on video? Like, what about me?" So I was like, "Sure, come." Right. So I always say this was not a scripted video. You know, she literally walked on and sat on the chair with me, and the
Uh-huh.
camera's rolling. And I said to her, you know, what should we talk about? She said, well, we should talk about empathy. I was like, you are
Okay.
well trained. But so I said to her, okay, so Umi, her name is Umi. Umi, tell me, what is listening? And she explained what she thinks listening is. And then I said to her, so what happens if we don't listen? And she
Mm,
thinks, and she says, this little 7-year-old girl in a green dress, she says, if you don't listen to me, I think you don't like me and you don't want to be my friend, right? When I talk about a memory, it's that. We knew as children, if you don't look at me, if you don't listen to me, if you're not interested in me, I think you don't care. Now, in the workplace, maybe we're not looking for friends. Maybe we are, but maybe we're not. But the point is, instinctively as humans, if you don't show me any interest, I know that I hold no value. And when that starts to happen, in fact, the irony is all of those individual issues, confidence and self censorship, and all the things we spoke about earlier, they then go up. Because when empathy is low, all of those isms, whether that's segregation or racism or ageism, all of those isms, all of those things that pull us apart just increase and we become more alone. And the last thing I'd say, Tyler, is you were saying earlier, you know, I think you said, I'm paraphrasing, but I think you said, if
yeah.
I
Yeah.
am to my community, I need to first, you know, look after myself, right? But what I also want your listeners to know is that when you are in community, it is better for you. So it's not all self-serving.
Yeah.
It's great to care for your community. We
Yeah.
should. But I want your listeners to know that you will be better. You will live longer, statistically
Yeah.
8 years. You will have a stronger immune system. If you unfortunately get a chronic disease, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, the data shows that you will recover better
Mm-hmm.
in community. So it was made that way, right? That when we're in community, it's good for them, it's good for us because we are pro social. And
Mm-hmm.
I think not enough of us think about that. Not enough of us teach our children about that.
When I was learning about empathy, when I was exploring, understanding, and appreciating my insecurities, one of the things that I realized that I felt empathy was the solution was that um, y- I guess there's a piece of that everyone, I believe this, that every single person living, breathing this world has insecurities, deals with insecurities. It is a human quality. At the same point, to this extent, I believe you and agree with you is everyone has the capacity to express empathy, right?
Yes.
That's a human, instinctual condition. However, when our insecurities overwhelm us, um, our empathy goes low. And I believe empathy's on the spectrum, right? You can either be an a-hole. I was an a-hole. It was all about me. I got to protect, intense. Or you can be a doormat and let people walk all over you. And so this idea that empathy is on the spectrum, a healthy expressing empathy, what you're talking about is when I'm in community and there's interactiveness is healthy. And where in the
Yes.
doormat, everyone's walking all over me is not healthy. When you're an a-hole, that's not healthy. And it's understanding that those can show up and they're both, I would say, low empathy.
Hmm.
What's your
Yeah, I mean,
take on that?
yes, the way the brain works is that, I mean, so I mentioned earlier that empathy as a skill set sits in your prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is not active, i.e., you are not using it when you are under pressure or fear or risk.
Mm,
We call it the fight or flight response, which
mm-hmm,
fundamentally means when you feel there is a risk to self, whether that is meeting someone who is very toxic or actually being at risk, you know, that there's a danger somewhere nearby. The brain responds by moving all your energy, hormones, blood to parts of your body that you need to survive in those situations. Now, The brain is a phenomenally advanced part of us, but what it has never been able to do is decipher between types of risk. So whether I'm facing a natural disaster and there is a great risk to my life, or I'm heading into my toxic boss's office, your body is going to respond the same way because the brain perceives threat. It doesn't know what type of threat. The reason I say that is to your example, Tyler, whether you are behaving like a very arrogant, ego led a-hole, you called it, right?
That's what I was. Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
a doormat, right? So people
Yeah.
are walking all over you. You are not seen.
Yeah.
You are not heard. You are not valued. At both ends of those spectrums, you are disconnected to community and disconnected to yourself. Therefore, you are at risk. Therefore, your brain is not working with the capacity
Yeah.
to access empathy. So, as you said, whenever you're living in these extreme states of strain, actually, your body is not at balance, right? You don't have a balanced neurological system. So, you're absolutely right that those things have to go hand in hand. The higher empathy you have, the healthier you will be,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
So, one thing that I'm not going to make the geographical denomination that, in some cultures there tends to be more of the, I would say, empathy spectrum where you're hard and callous. But in a lot of leadership roles, that's what's expected. Don't let
Hmm.
people walk all over you. You have to dictate. You have to be the driver, right? You have to be the authoritarian, some people believe, so that almost low empathy. Whereas you go to a lot of military, a lot of special forces, they're like, no, dial up the empathy, be there with people. And so how do you approach when you go to organizations and speak, and like you soft pedal into empathy so they will swallow the pill, right? To drink what Mrs. Mary Poppins, and let the spoonful of sugar take it down. How do you help them say, hey, that's not serving you or anyone else? Let's bring that back a little bit to not be in that fight or flight situation, to express more empathy.
Hmm. So I do two things. First, I use a lot of data. So I tell
Okay.
them very early on that empathetic organizations make 23% higher profits. And then I know I've got them, right? So, um,
Especially those data-driven analytical
yeah,
leaders, right? Yeah.
data-driven
Okay.
people, and most leaders need data, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about 68% higher levels of engagement. We talk about 17% higher levels of efficiency, 34% higher levels of output. So we talk about really good data that says
Yeah.
this is not me talking about this. This is data from Harvard and
Yeah.
all kinds of
Yeah.
places. Gallup, a lot of it from Gallup, that shows you that when you create this in your workplace, you're going to do better. Right? I'm not asking you to be nice. Please be nice. But I'm not asking you to be nice, right? I'm asking you to use a skill set that's going to drive your business and all of your metrics. So the first thing is to really focus on the data so that there's no, I don't know, debate in their mind
Yeah.
as to whether what I'm talking about makes sense for their business. The second goes back to that idea of this being a memory and this just being a human skill. And I think when I started this journey, which was about 5 years ago, I felt like I had to talk about business things, right? Because
Mm.
I'd come from the corporate world and I was working with corporates. But what I realized over these years is that the more human stories you share with people, the better they respond, which of course sounds obvious now. But it took me time to build the confidence to do that. So I now talk a lot about my daughter. And I think years ago, and that's probably a woman thing as well, like a confidence thing that women have, I wouldn't have. Like, I think in the beginning of my years as a mum, I sort of pretended she didn't exist in the workplace. Do you know what I mean? I love her as a mum outside of work, but when I was in work, I was talking about work. But I realized over these years that the more I share stories, yes, of my life, but also I met this man, Tyler, and he has these phenomenal cows, right? The more I tell stories of other people, the more these very hard edge business leaders open up, right?
Hmm.
And so what's happening now, Tyler, is often after these sessions, I will get a message on LinkedIn, for example, from some senior man somewhere who says, Mimi, thank you for the session. I enjoyed it, blah, blah, blah. But then they say to me, I think you changed my relationship with my wife forever. And I think, wow. I mean, I don't talk about marriage. you know? But this is why that concept of this as a memory is so important, because people know this, right? And even though I didn't do a workshop to help him improve communication with
Yeah.
his wife,
Yeah.
what he's taking away is, oh, hang on, I don't think I'm doing this, right? And more often than not, that is what senior male, particularly
Yeah.
leaders, say
Yeah.
to me in the coffee break. They come to me and they say, Miss Mimi, I don't think I've ever listened to anyone in my whole life. And I say,
Yeah.
don't worry, sir, you're not alone, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a revelation, actually, when people sit and listen to this. So I don't have to work so hard, I have to be honest, Tyler, to convince people. I think
Yeah.
when you bring passion and energy to a room and then you back it up with some data and some stories, people tend to follow.
Yeah.
You know, they might
Yeah.
not do it, they might
Yeah.
hate it, right? But the
Yeah.
majority of people say, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, we make all of our decisions based upon emotions. That's
We
it.
do.
And so it's, even the people that want to say, I'm analytical, it's like, no, you're going to base it upon your emotion if you connect with the story, right? It's like, I may grab your attention with the numbers, but then give me stories that relate and back it up and like confound it. And, I share this with you. It's like, for me being intense, and this is a story that I share when I speak or interact with people and those corporate people, is my intensity was a response to the death of my brother. Because when he died, my response was, I'm going to put my head down and push, because that's how I survived. And so as I tell the story about talking to the sheriff after that happened and just saying, being super, super intense, that's how I responded. But what I realized, to your point, as we're talking through this, my empathy went to none. A-hole. Like, I don't want you to care about what I'm going through. I'm going to go deal with what I need to deal with, and I'm done answering questions. And so I think as we're reflecting, as I'm thinking back of how I responded in this wall of, around my insecurity is, oh no, I am hurting. I don't know what to do with this. I'm only 14. I have no idea. And I'm getting questioned, just like, oh, that worked. Oh, that worked. And I think that happens in so many corporate situations where it's a response and they're like, oh, that worked. Well, I'll keep doing it more.
First of all, I'm very sorry about your brother.
Well, thank you.
But yes, you are right. I think we get into behavioral systems. And when I think back to this phenomenal woman in this workshop I did who said,
Yeah.
if I had known what empathy is, I wouldn't have done what I did.
Yeah.
We have to have options to change patterns, right? And if we want behavioral change, we have to very clearly and very empathetically, that's why I talk about giving
Yeah.
audiences things on their own terms, give these men, women content that allows them to change the pattern. And that makes it really easy.
Yeah.
I have a framework, but I have it because HR teams asked me for one, right? And eventually, after about 3 years, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, fine, have a framework, right? Everybody wants a framework.
Yeah.
But I don't really think we need frameworks, right? What we need is inspiration. So behavioral change doesn't come from steps 1 to 4. Maybe 1 to 4 helps, right? Because it helps me tick it off and structure it. And I'm, like you said, an analytical person. But if I think about 14-year-old Tyler going through those moments and becoming more and more insular because it helped you manage the pain or even at times diminish the pain, no one could have said, I'm sure people did actually at the time, you should breathe and you should sleep and you should all of these things, right? Those functional realities, they're just messaging,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not options. They're not inspiration. They're not behavioral changing realities. So I think if we want to change the corporate world, we have to give people options. We have to give people inspiration, and we have to give them that content in a way that feels accessible to them.
What touches you here, right in your heart, as you do this, or like as we're sitting here, to make it all meaningful and worth pursuing?
I think it's who I am, Tyler. People have started asking me, how did you find your purpose? And I always say, I didn't. It found me. I think I was meant to do this. This is not it is a passion. I was gonna say this is not just a
Yeah.
passion. It is a passion.
Yeah.
I'm very passionate
Yeah.
about my work,
Yeah. Me
but
too.
it's a
Yeah. I,
calling, I think. I think everything that happened in my life was to bring me to now, to do
yeah.
this. I mentioned earlier I was in a school yesterday doing some work at the beginning of the school year with teachers, 250 teachers, many of them women, I'd say 80% women. And at the end, one woman came up to me, and this happens relatively often. And she said to me, Mimi, can I hug you? And I
Hmm.
said, sure, right? And again, we're in Asia, so this is not quite as huggy a culture as
Yeah.
America, potentially. Um, and she said, oh, it makes me want to cry, but she said, thank you for touching my soul because I needed that today, right? That's what I that's what I get up for, Tyler. I get up for helping other people. I know it sounds so contrite, all right? So contrived,
No, no. I mean,
but it is really that.
well, but and I share about my brother and kind of my growth and evolution and realizing why I would be on this podcast talking about it is because eventually, as I worked through all of those things, and it happened when I was 14. It wasn't until my late 30s, 24,
Mm,
25 years of slogging through all of
sure.
this isn't working.
Mm,
And, it was spiritual for me, and I'm a person of Christian faith, and God telling me, this is how you deal with things. Oh, this isn't working. And then, the next phase of that is, coming to the realization, oh, I need to tell this story, understanding how I got there. And once I understood, it's like, oh, my brother's life has purpose
yes.
because of what happened 25 years before, and what happened to him is like, oh, that's how I responded. Because as you brought up, there's a lot of people that are dealing with things that don't understand how it manifests. That's how I'm going to deal with it. That's, I heard somebody once say, and I appreciate this from you because I think you said it in a way, is you can only connect the dots looking back.
Mm,
It's kind of like, well, that's what my calling is like. Well, because if you look back, all the dots from going back to England to being in South Africa to being all over the world, it's like, well, those are the dots. And now I can see the dots. And in what I understand and I appreciate when I get to go share with people, whether here or in rooms, is, hey, you're not alone and you can go through this. And people just need, whether the culture stands for it or not, they need somebody to put an arm around them and they need a hug because
yes. They
that's
just
what
need
communities do.
Mm. I love your point, Tyler, about your brother's life had a purpose. Last week, I was on a vacation in Asia, and there was a family who were in the ocean, 5 of them, and the littlest one was 10, and she died in the ocean. And she was with them, and they got separated, and she unfortunately didn't live. And my little girl asked me a lot of questions. Why? This is very deep for a
Yeah.
Wednesday morning. Why would God let her die when she's only 10? My little girl was saying, but mummy, she should live till 100. She had 90 more years, all these things in a child's head, right? Why does that happen, And one of the things I tried to explain to her was the concept of what you just said, which is that every life has a purpose. And even though at the time, the loss, the grief, the unfairness of
Mm-hmm.
that is overwhelming to get your head around. Like you just said, Tyler, often in retrospect, whilst we would never wish that death in a million years, just like with your brother, the impact on the impact of his life on your life has changed the world because now you are able to run this show and
Yeah.
to touch so many people that arguably you never would have.
Yeah.
So I really love what you're saying there around every life has a purpose and that looking back we connect dots. I think we just have to be open. We have to be open to connect those dots to find belief, to find purpose, and then to lean into it because we don't always know the right choice. But more often than not, you can feel the right decision. But that is also a skill. You have to be very able and open to tune into yourself.
The ability to feel and decide to feel
Yes.
comes when, in my belief, is when we accept who we are and be okay with that. And really kind of, in my opinion, it's recognize those fears and insecurities we have and say, okay, but that's not going to, dictate how I can empathize, how I can relate, how I can sit and listen and understand. I didn't know, what happened with you and your daughter last week, but I can understand and I can relate and I can appreciate that we're all carrying something.
Yeah.
And but it takes patience and time and understanding that is so worthwhile in a world that's telling us, no, you don't have time for that.
Patience. I wrote about it yesterday in my new book. I write about it all the time, actually. I love that you said that. I think it is, Tyler, the most underutilized and underspoken about asset that we have, because the world is so fast and social media will make it look even faster. And I put a post up about this actually this week, just to say, everybody wants you to do it tomorrow. You don't do it tomorrow, right? I mean, unless you're mega rich, right? And then you can just afford to buy your way into everything. And that's not the
But even then, that doesn't work. Let's be
well,
honest.
even
We,
then, it doesn't
no,
work,
that
right?
doesn't work.
But patience, it's very hard to master, right? You have to be very tenacious to live in patience for things. But I'm really glad you mentioned that towards the end of this conversation, because I think that patience with yourself, patience with your progress, patience with where you're going and how fast you want to get there, and that belief that what is meant for you will come for you, but you have to be patient.
How
So
are you
I love
working on
that.
patience?
Hmm?
How are you working on patience?
Oh, with patience. Look, it's not easy, and people will say to me, but that's really hard. I'm like, I know. I think tenacity is, so I have 3 words that I teach and I train with when it comes to kind of personal journey, really.
Yeah.
Patience is one. The second is tenacity. And the third is consistency. And consistency often comes up in the context of social media and all those types of things, like having consistent content, showing up consistently on your podcast, all those types of things. But I think consistency also gives you a rhythm to be patient, right? Every day, I get up and do this. By 2:00 today, and today in my time, it's 8 a.m. By 2:00, I will have done a podcast with you in the United States. My next session is in California in 90 minutes time. By lunchtime, I have a workshop with a company that has people all over Asia, from Saudi Arabia to Australia. That rhythm is what keeps me patient, right? Because every time I think, oh, why don't I have another 1,000,000 followers, or whatever it is that somebody asks you for that day, you just go back into the rhythm of the work. Right. And then it's irrelevant, right? It just doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how fast I grow today or tomorrow, because speaking to Tyler was great. So live in this moment, not the moments that haven't yet come. So I think if you get consistency, tenacity, and patience in that little triangle,
that's great.
it gives you a real rhythm to keep going.
Where can people learn more about you, empathy everywhere, all that stuff?
They can find me on Instagram, YouTube, or LinkedIn. Those are my main platforms, at Mimi Nicklin. I also just launched Blue Sky, so I'm very excited to be photojournaling empathy around the world on Blue Sky. And they can find my website, www.empathyeverywhere.co. Oh, and my books are on Amazon. So my new book, Empathy at Work, is on Amazon now.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit subscribe as well as the bell to get notified whenever we drop new content. If you're listening, if you could rate and review this episode, it will help more people all over the world find impactful leaders like Mimi. Till next time, choose to lead with impact.